theme of our series this semester is the image of the United States abroad. And you heard my opening remarks. Yeah, there it is, right? And those dollar bills are all over the right-hand side of that logo to reflect the wealth that the United States represents and so on. You've done a lot of traveling, as you just indicated, going back a long, long time, and you've done it in a variety of government roles. But you also have been in the private sector. Can you tell us a little bit about your observations of how the United States is viewed from abroad?
I'm happy to give a shot at it, but in some ways, I suppose the best place to do would be to ask people from abroad. It's one of the lessons we have to learn is to get their perspective. And I must say I was very pleased I had a chance to meet some students and faculty at lunch. I'm absolutely delighted that the university has done the things it's done to bring in people from around the world. I think it's wonderful for the university community. It's certainly wonderful for the people that have a chance to come be here. This gets complicated quickly. I think I felt over the years that part of the response depends on whether people are referring to the United States as a society or as a government. And this actually is a distinction with some other countries, and it's a distinction that I think serves the United States well. People are often attracted to the education, the culture, kind of the openness of the United States as a society, the education. And now and then, even when they may disagree with government policies, there's that part of America, perhaps separate from the United States government. Another part, however, is you undoubtedly are going to, it's important to recognize the huge diversity. So you will find even with the press treatment at any given times, often at elections, people often will look at certain countries, maybe certain European polities, but one of the things that I've certainly seen in my career as trade representative at the World Bank is, while that's an important part of the relationships, also the emerging markets are, the attitudes in China, the attitudes in India, of course, Southeast Asia, Africa. When you take them all together, I think one part is that anytime a country is large, and the U.S. is still about 25% of the world's GDP, most powerful military, influential, significant, it can create ambivalent relations. For some, it's the elephant, and therefore sometimes elephants may head off in one direction and stomp on something without recognizing. So if you're a smaller country, there's a worry about whether the United States appreciates the circumstances. For some, it's still looking to the United States to solve problems that sometimes people act as if they can handle on their own, but they won't. I remember Colin Powell once was telling me about there's some small islands between Morocco and Spain, and has a historical position, and for all that was said and done, they needed to bring the United States in to help try to deal with these issues. Obviously, this is the big part about North Africa today. And so there's also a demand for the United States, but there's also sometimes a fear that the United States can be overbearing or insensitive to other issues. So I think for public officials in particular, it puts a real sort of requirement. Number one, if you're hoping to be loved or have deep friendship, I think you're bound to be disappointed. I would aim for respect more than affection, because any power that's going to be large and influential is going to create mixed feelings. But the second part is how one uses power and influence becomes very important. And whether one shows a willingness to listen, a sensitivity, attentiveness to other history and cultures, these can become quite critical when the United States is at its best, in my view, which is not just when it acts alone, but when it does what it's tried to do over the 20th century with allies, with coalitions, with institutions, which is the World Bank created out of World War II, to try to make multilateralism work in a different era. Having said that, there's times as a leader, a country does have to head off on its own, or at least be willing to go off on its own, because sometimes there's a greater sense of responsibility and accountability that comes out of the international politics. The last point I'll make on this, though, is obviously sometimes people abroad don't recognize America as politics too. And sometimes there's a sense that America not only has endless resources or endless ability to use force and influence, but political leaders of both parties still have to be able to ground their support in the public will. I come from the Midwest, so sometimes, I think people don't fully appreciate that, when the United States is deploying military force, that's somebody's 20 or 21-year-old kid. And often there's a legitimate question about how presidents and political leaders are going to draw the American commitment, whether it be economic or whether it be military or whether it be political.